Hello and welcome to Catherine Sews. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you didn't see my last video, I made a knockoff from a pajama top and pajama pants. Very simple and straightforward. And so if you didn't see that one, check that out and then come right back here because now we're going to cut it out and sew them up. I bought some bamboo knit fabrics which I thought were really pretty, and I like stretchy pajamas. It's just much more comfortable, and so that's what I'm going to be making mine out of. I'm going to give you a few variations on ways you can do it, and I'm going to give you step-by-step instructions that work for beginner or intermediate sewers. So I'm glad to have you along for the ride. Let's just jump right in. So the pattern is ready to go, the fabric has been washed, and now let's just talk about laying out the fabric for a second. So I'm doing a regular lengthwise fold with the selvages together. I want to show you a situation that my students sometimes struggle with. If I have the cut edge together over here, you're going to see all of this twisting and roping, and you just cannot smooth out your fabric very easily at all. If I want the selvages together and the cut end together, it just doesn't work. So here's the trick. You're going to pick up your fabric by the fold and give it a little shake like that. I really don't care if these cut ends come together because that's just how it was cut, or if it's off grain at all. The cut end doesn't matter if it lines up or not. What matters is the selvage has to line up and it has to be smooth. Now, having said that the selvage has to line up, look at the fabric here. This selvage, the print stops a good 1.5 inches away from the edge. On the other side though, the print comes a lot closer to the edge. So I really don't want to line them up perfectly. I want to have the printed edge lined up. And then even as I'm laying out, I'm going to shake that fold and get it to smooth out by itself. And then here's another good trick for this see-through ruler. You can use it to help you smooth out your fabric. So I want you to see over here how far off the two cut edges are. That's a huge difference, right? But this doesn't matter. As long as I don't put my pattern piece over this cut edge, I'm fine. This difference doesn't matter because the selvages are together. That's the important thing. And the fold is nice and smooth, no roping and no twisting. When you place your pattern pieces, you want the grain line to be parallel to the selvage. So it's not the edge of my pattern piece that goes parallel to the selvage, it's the grain line, so that the pant hangs straight when it's on the body. For the front and back of the t-shirt, the grain line is the edge of this pattern piece that we're going to place right on the fold. I don't want it just pointing toward that fold, I want it right on the fold. If I'm a 1/4 inch away, that's on the fold, so when you open that up, you're adding actually a 1/2 inch difference. So you really do need to be right on the fold. It's good to just start with a couple pins on the fold there, just so it's not going to shift around. And you want to pin about every hand width or so, especially around curves. There's a few mistakes that beginners make. One is just not putting enough pins. Another is just stabbing their pin through once, and it doesn't fold like that. You really have to get it back through the paper as well. Another mistake that beginners make sometimes is this, where they're letting their pin hang out over the cutting edge. I need to cut right on the cutting line, so that pin would be in my way. So no pin should cross your cutting line. And then the last mistake that I see beginners make sometimes is doing this, where they get a pin in, and then even after spending all this time smoothing out their fabric, they would lift it up to slide their hand under to get that pin through. And now look at the mess I've made, right? I need to smooth that all back out. So that's not a good way. So keep it smooth, and to get that pin through, you're just going to push it through against your work surface, which is why we don't do a layout on your good dining room table, right? You're working on a work surface here, and so don't be afraid to just kind of scrape that pin against your work surface to get it pushed right back out. If you're comfortable with the rotary cutter, you could put way fewer pins and put weights instead, and then just run around this with a rotary cutter. Even before you put all your pins, it's good to plan where everything is going to go, just so you know that your layout is working and you're going to be able to get all of your puzzle pieces fitting on your fabric. So if you're going to use scissors, you're going to start by sliding your scissor under, nice long smooth cut, and then slide your scissors into the cut. So it ends up being a smooth line. Cut a little bit past the corner so that you have room to come in the other way. Don't try to just cut your way around the corner. If you're opting instead to use a rotary cutter, it needs to be a good sharp one. And you're just going to be cutting right beside your pattern piece. Don't cut the notches with the rotary cutter because it'll go way too deep. Just use the tip of your scissors and make a little snip. It's like 1/8 of an inch or maybe 3 millimeters. So the rotary cutter is faster. It's obviously more dangerous. I've given myself wicked cuts with one. I've seen my students give themselves wicked cuts with a rotary cutter. So just be super careful. So the one with the birds is all cut out. And now I'm going to cut the one with the stripes, but I am going to make a couple variations that I'll show you on the stripe one. So the stripe is going to be the shorts. Also, I'm going to do a shirt tail ending on the t-shirt because I've had a request of how to hem a shirt tail, like a curved hem. So I might as well do that here. For the shirt tail, I'm going to drop it down 2 inches and kind of create a gentle S curve. I'm going to start with a right angle here and end up by smoothing it right back into that edge there. The last thing I need is the neckband for the striped one. I'm just going to be cutting along the stripe, and I want to cut it about 75% of my neck edge. So I need an 18-inch neckband, and I'm going to do 2 inches wide. Everything is cut, notches are snipped, we're ready to go, so let's start sewing. Okay, so we're finally ready to sew, but I'm not going to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to go straight to the serger. And if you haven't already been convinced that you want a serger, this might be the video that does it, because you'll be surprised at how quickly this comes together. I'm going to do almost the entire project on the serger, and then I'll just go to the regular sewing machine to finish off the hems and the neck bands, and that's really it. The rest is just going to be straight up serged, and it's going to go lightning fast. I just always like to test out my tension and make sure when I open that seam out, if the tension isn't right on your needle thread, that'll just open up and show too much of the stitching. But I'm happy with that. It looks good. So let's jump in. Good. So even though I cut these out separately, I am going to batch sew them. I've got my whole stack here, and I'm going to do everything that I can on the serger. So what I'm going to start with, if you've cut your fabric with it being right sides together, then you don't do any rearranging on the shorts or the pants. You're going to serge the 2 curved edges together. So that's the center front and the center back, just those curves. That's your first step, and just as they are, front to front, back to back. So I like to start by just serging the curved center front and center back seam of the shorts and the pants. This is the nice part about cutting fabrics right side together, is that the shorts and the pants are already lined up as to how I want to sew them. If you don't have a serger, you can use one of the stretch stitches on your regular machine. And I'm just going to leave that sit right there because I'm going to feed the next piece right in, matching up the stripes. Now, if you're not confident in your pattern, then I would definitely just cut and sew 1 set. I'm doing 2 because I feel pretty confident that that pattern worked out nicely. But here's the pant front, so I'll do the curved seam of that, and then the curved seam of the back pants. Remember, I drafted 1/2 inch seam allowance. My serge width is only 1/4 inch, so I can either just serge off 1/4 inch, or I can leave it as a just in case kind of measure. So there's the shorts. I'm going to open those out now, and I've got this one right side up, this one right side down against it, and then I'm going to serge the side seams. The other side seam. Now I'm going to serge right across the whole bottom edge of the shorts. It's just easier to serge this bottom edge of the shorts while you can still do it flat, rather than waiting till you do the inseam and then you have to serge around the circle. So easier to do it now. Normally I press my seams as I go, but since this is just a lightweight t-shirt knit, the seam just looks absolutely fine. So I am going to go ahead and serge the inseam. So to do the inseam, I'm matching up the first corner, and then I'm matching up the seam, the center front and center back seam. Seam allowance away from me and towards me on the bottom so that it reduces the bulk right at the middle there. And then bring corner to corner there again. The last bit of serging to do on the shorts is all around the whole top edge. Good, and just in no time at all, the shorts are just all serged together. And I'm going to do the same on the pants. So the pants have obviously a much longer side seam. So if I wanted to, I could take these over to a table and put a few pins at key points. I'm just going to work from corner to notch to corner. So I've matched up my corners and I've matched up my notches there. I'm still holding those two notches together. Good. Now that I reach the notch, now I come down to the bottom corners, put those two corners together, halfway between, and I'm holding the corner. And edges together. I'm not going to do across the bottom of the leg because I have a cuff going onto the pants. Good. And now I'm going to do the inseam pretty much the same way. Bring corners together, and then I'll find the two notches. And then I'm bringing the seam to the seam, same as I did on the shorts. And then the two notches. You always have to keep your eye on the both edges because it would be very easy to miss that bottom edge and then you end up with a hole. Around the top edge, and then we're done serging the pants. And then I'm just going to get the shoulder seams lined up here. Front and back, right sides together. The shoulder seam of the other t-shirt. I've got the front and back of the top here. There's my shoulder seam. On a casual thing like this, and when the cap is not too high, set the sleeve in when the front can be flattened out. So I'm just putting that notch right to that shoulder seam. That's the top of the sleeve. Putting that right to the shoulder seam. And then I'm going to just bring the corner of the sleeve to the corner of the top. I'm going to start right here. I'm just holding the next matching points. I'm holding that notch to that shoulder seam. This might be a little more tricky because it is a curve and it's actually two different shaped curves that you're putting together. So as I go, I just really want to be mindful about my edges. And then once I'm in the top half, I can stretch a little bit more if I need to. And have edges together as I go. Lovely. Notch to the shoulder seam. So now I've got the corners together and about halfway along that sleeve, along that armhole, I'll just pinch there. And then it's just a matter of bringing my edges together. I don't really like to have pins at the serger because they can cause you a lot of problems if you accidentally let a pin get too close to the blade. Good, so there's one sleeve in, and just double check that looks nice. Perfect. So I'm going to set the other three sleeves. I do like to have the sleeve on top of the body, mainly because of this. Do you see how the extra fullness in the sleeve is going to give you that fold? And if I was upside down and had the sleeve on the bottom, I might not see that. It might get caught into my seam and I might accidentally cut it. So having the sleeve on top helps a lot. I'm going to serge across the bottom edge of the sleeve for the same reason. It's just easier to do it when it's flat. Good, and now I'm folding the sleeve in half, matching up these corners. I'm going to match up this is the armhole seam, I'll match there, and then the bottom corner of the top. So I'm serging the whole side seams now. Let the serger work for you. Let it trim off all of your threads as you go. Don't let them get caught into the seam. Okay, so finding my two bottom corners, holding those together, and then finding a halfway point to hold on to as well. With one side seam done, now I can serge across the whole bottom edge. And then do the other side seam. So one top is all serged together. I'm going to do the exact same steps of the other t-shirt. Set both sleeves, serge across the bottom of the sleeves, serge one side seam, serge across the whole bottom, and And I'm going to serge the bottom edge of this shirt, but remember it has the shirt tail. So it's the same idea, it's just got curves to it. And then serge the other side seam. Easy peasy. At the regular machine now. So for the casing at the top, I want to find which is the center back. The center back is the longer seam, so I can see that I've got the front up. This is the back. Whichever one is longer is the back. I'm going to be putting in an elastic that's 1 inch wide, so I need to make sure that I'm sewing this bigger than 1 inch. And there are lots of ways of putting in the elastic, but the one way that's sort of the most flexible, where you can adjust the elastic after you've put it in, is making your casing, leave a gap at the center back, and then thread your elastic through. There are other ways that may be more professional, but they don't give you that ability to adjust it when you try it on. Here I'm turning down 1 1/4 inches, 3 centimeters. I'm going to use a straight stitch. Now, if you would feel more comfortable, you could definitely measure your way around this casing and pin as you go. But I feel okay just checking it every once in a while to make sure I haven't strayed from the 3 centimeter fold. So now I'll take the elastic, put it on a big safety pin. So it's just push, 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 and then pull. To cut the length of the elastic, I just take the elastic, wrap it around my waist, snug it up nice and snug, and then just cut about 1 inch extra. And try not to let your elastic twist as you go through. With the elastic just overlapping, I'm going to go back and forth across it. So then to close up that little gap, I like to do it from the outside so that it looks like one smooth continuous line. If you want to make sure the elastic doesn't roll, after you've worn it for a while and you've stretched out the elastic a bit, it will roll, and then it's really hard to get it to ever unroll. And I'll pin it at all 4 seams. And then I'm going to use a 3-step zigzag. So after the back tack is done, I'm running the presser foot right in the middle of that casing, and I'm stretching as I go, and it makes it so that the elastic will never ever twist. There's the casing with that 3-step zigzag, and it's kind of cute. It is more comfortable because it's not going to roll. But for the pants, I'm going to show you one slightly different way to do the casing. I've pinned up a casing that's 2 inches or 5 centimeters wide. But then there's one other little step I'm going to do just to make a cute little variation on these. So first of all, sewing on the serging, leaving the gap at the center back, same way. I'm going to sew a second line around the casing, this time just at the edge of my presser foot and no gap. I'm going to start and end right at the center back. And now I'm going to put the elastic through, again, just like normal. That extra row of stitching is going to make a cute little ruffle at the top of my casing. Can you see how it makes a cute little ruffle? And it softens the top edge too, so it's actually quite comfortable like that too. But I'm going to do that 3-step zigzag along this casing as well. It's really cute and nice and soft, comfortable. So hemming the bottom of the shorts, I want a little bit of a deeper hem here because they probably will roll if I do a shorter hem. So I'm going to do minimum 2 centimeters. I'm just going to use a zigzag stitch. Don't let your hem start to rope and twist like that. Lift up your presser foot, kind of ease it back, make a good shape. If it doesn't look good, don't sew it. So manipulate your fabric around till you get rid of that roping before you sew that. One last thing to do on the pants is the cuff on the bottom. So I'm going to put the cuff in half, sew that seam just with a straight stitch. And then I'm going to open out the seam. Keep that seam nice and flat as you fold it together and flip out your cuff. So bring your raw edges evenly together, and then my pants are still inside out. And I'm going to put the cuff inside, matching the seam of the cuff to the inseam. Stretch it all the way across and pin over here. So you'll have 4 pins around this circle. And sew around the circle, stretching out the cuff as you go. Do the same to the other leg, and then I'll serge that seam, and then the pants are done. I'm going to hem the sleeves about a finger width, that's like 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch. So I just start with a back tack and then organize the next section. I'm just going to use a zigzag stitch. Otherwise, when you stretch it, the thread will break. I like to start and stop at the small seam underneath the sleeve just so my back tack is slightly more discreet. I'm going to hem the striped one, which has the shirt tail, like the curved hem. So it's just going to be a skinny hem like this. Anytime you're doing a curved hem, it does have to be skinnier, but I'm still going to use that zigzag stitch. And then coming around the curve, I just want to shape it nicely, make a nice shape. This serging kind of eases in that edge that's a little bit bigger on those outside curves. But just organize one section at a time. Just make a nice shape, make sure it looks good before you sew it. So I think that zigzag looks fine. And notice one thing to pay attention to is when you're doing a zigzag on a narrow hem like this, you want your needle to be going on and off the edge of the serging. You want it to be on any narrow hem, any hem really, you want to be up on this edge, not down here. If I sewed this too close to this edge, it would really ripple and look terrible. But I think once I press that, that's going to be just fine. It's kind of cute. So the last thing that the striped t-shirt needs is the band around the neck. And I'm just going to sew a small seam along the short edge with a straight stitch, turning the band right side out. And I'm just going to pin that together. Knits do tend to roll, especially if I stretched this out, it would really roll, so I'm trying not to stretch it. This pin or the seam is going to be the center back, so I'm folding it in half, and exactly opposite the center back is going to be the center front, so I'll put a pin there. And then bring those two pins together. This is called quarter marking. And so I'm going to mark the two sides as well. You could think of this as like north, south, east, and west, but marking 4 equal points. And then I'll take the t-shirt and put the two shoulder seams together. So I'm folding that shoulder seams together, putting a pin at the center back, one at the center front. Now when I bring the center front and center back together, now I can see that the side point is a little bit ahead of the shoulder seam. So now the neckline is quarter marked. Good. So the seam on my band is going to go to the center back. Let me just double check again. Yep, this is the center back. It's the shorter of the neckline. So I'll pin the center back to the center back. So now you're just matching up your quarter points. North to north, east to east, south to south, west to west. All 3 raw edges are coming together. The t-shirt is inside out and the band is going to the inside, so that's how you get it right sides together. Okay, here we go. Running the edge of my presser foot along the edge of the fabric. So I'm going to sew this around and then try it on and just make sure that band is sitting nicely before I serge it. And I'm stretching as I go, because this has to stretch to get over my head too, so I need to sew it in a stretched out position. Okay, so the neck is good, so now I'm just going to serge around the seam allowance of the neckline, and just be careful that you're not cutting anything you don't mean to cut, because when you're this close to being done, you just cry. Good. So that one's done. I'm going to give that a final press. So the last thing I want to do on this white t-shirt is put the lace trim. This is just a stretch lace, but I want to show you nice techniques that you can use even with a fine lace. So I'm wrapping this around the neck, a little past the V. I'm aiming to get the straighter edge of the lace to go along the edge of the t-shirt. The scallop edge is facing in. As I have it here crossing at the V, I want to make sure that the crossover part is centered. I want the scallops to be even as well. So you kind of have to assemble the lace first. You don't sew a seam in lace in the same way that you sew a seam in fabric. I'm not going to put these two pieces right side together and sew a seam. That's not a nice way to treat lace. So instead, I'm going to just overlap, and I'm going to be sewing a zigzag stitch right down the middle of this overlap. It doesn't have to be a straight line though. I can follow the pattern that's set into the lace with my zigzag. Then I'm going to be trimming away the extra on this side and the extra on that side. Good, so now I'm just pinning the lace to the lace, not to the t-shirt. I'm going to start at the point there, end at this point here, but where I meander in between doesn't really matter. It's going to blend into the shape of the lace. So I'm going to take that to the sewing machine and do a nice fine zigzag that meanders through the lace. I'm going to use a zigzag stitch that's 3.5 millimeters wide and 1.2 millimeters long. And if you have a clear zigzag foot, this would be a good time to use it so that you can really see the pattern in the lace. And so now that I've got the two layers zigzag together, I'm going to go in and cut off the extra on both sides. So that's pretty. So now I'm going to put it back onto the t-shirt. I'm going to pin all the way around. Here I'm just finding the center back of the lace and the center back of the t-shirt to put those 2 points together, just so I know I'm evenly distributing the lace all the way around. And I can hold it in this slightly stretched out position, keeping the straighter edge of the lace along the edge of my neckline. So I've pinned around the whole neckline and it seems to be sitting nicely. After I've done the zigzag, and if I'm happy with everything, then I'll be trimming away the excess t-shirt. Good, so I'm just following along that scallop with my zigzag stitch. So it's a lot of little bends and turns and pivots. I've gone all the way around with my little tight zigzag, and now I'm going to trim away the excess t-shirt. Small scissors are important here because I don't want to accidentally cut the lace or make a hole in the t-shirt. So just wiggling my blade in between the t-shirt and the lace and just snipping my way around. And then you can see what a pretty edge that gives. Isn't that pretty? So it's nice to play around with pajamas because you can experiment with techniques that you're not so worried about. But if you learn to use lace like that, you can do it on all kinds of garments. That's so pretty, right? Okay, so I had just enough fabric to be able to piece together a third top. Having that pattern all set to go made it lightning fast to just cut this and serge it all together. I made a little pocket for it. And then I decided to do a V-neck trimmed in the stripe. So I've got that all pinned together. If you ever want me to show you how to do a V-neck like this, leave a comment and I'll make a video on it. It's sort of fussy, but not difficult. Isn't that funny? So the top that I pieced together just from the leftover scraps is my favorite one.